There is a moment in life where you start to notice that happiness doesn't feel the same way it used to. And at first, you don't take it too seriously because you assume it's just a phase or something temporary that will pass on its own. You still laugh sometimes, you still enjoy certain things, and from the outside, everything might even look normal. But deep down, you can feel that something has changed in the way you experience your own emotions. The things that once made you genuinely happy now feel weaker, less intense, almost like they don't fully reach you anymore. And that difference is difficult to ignore once you become aware of it. You begin to notice that your reactions are not the same, that your excitement feels shorter, that your motivation fades faster, and that your overall emotional state feels flatter than it used to. It's not that you are completely unhappy, but you are also not truly happy in the way you remember being before. This creates a confusing space where you don't know how to define what you are feeling, because it is not strong enough to call it sadness, but it is also not enough to call it happiness. You start questioning yourself, wondering if something is wrong, or if this is just part of growing up, or if maybe life is supposed to feel this way after a certain point. And the more you think about it, the more you realize that this feeling has been there for longer than you expected. It didn't appear suddenly, it slowly replaced something that used to feel natural. And now you are left with a version of life that works, but doesn't fully satisfy you emotionally. You keep moving forward, but without the same sense of excitement or connection. And that is what makes it difficult, because nothing is clearly broken, but something is clearly missing. So the question becomes, why does happiness fade even when life continues? Why do you stop feeling the same joy without a clear reason? And more importantly, can that feeling come back? One of the main reasons happiness starts to fade is because your brain is constantly adapting to your experiences, and over time, things that once felt exciting begin to feel normal. This process is natural, and it is how your brain maintains balance, but it also means that the emotional intensity of your experiences decreases as they become familiar. What once felt new now feels predictable, and what once felt exciting now feels expected. This is why moments that used to bring you happiness slowly lose their impact, not because they are less valuable, but because your brain no longer reacts to them in the same way. You don't notice this change immediately because it happens gradually, almost invisibly over time. But eventually, you start to feel that something is missing, even though nothing has actually disappeared from your life. Your environment may be the same, your routines may be the same, your relationships may be the same, but your emotional response is different. And that difference creates a sense of emptiness or dissatisfaction that is difficult to explain. You begin to chase new experiences, new goals, or new distractions in an attempt to feel something again. But the more you rely on novelty to feel happiness, the more temporary that happiness becomes. Because your brain will always adapt again. This creates a cycle where you constantly need something new to feel the same level of emotion. And over time, that cycle becomes exhausting because happiness starts to depend on change instead of being something you can feel within your current life. Another reason why happiness fades is because your attention is constantly divided, and when your attention is divided, your emotional experiences become weaker. You are rarely fully present in the moment because your mind is always occupied with something else, whether it is your phone, your thoughts, your responsibilities, or your next task. This means that even when something good is happening, you are not fully there to experience it deeply. You are partially engaged, but not completely connected. And when you are not fully present, your brain does not process the moment in a meaningful way. It becomes just another passing experience instead of something that leaves an emotional impact. Over time, this reduces your ability to feel happiness, because happiness requires attention. It requires presence. It requires the ability to fully experience what is happening without being mentally somewhere else. But if your mind is always moving, always distracted, always looking for the next thing, then even positive moments feel incomplete. They don't fully register. They don't stay with you. And because of that, your life begins to feel emotionally flat, even if good things are still happening around you. Happiness is not only influenced by what happens around you, but also by how connected you are to yourself. And this is something many people lose over time without realizing it. You become focused on doing, achieving, and maintaining your life, but you stop paying attention to how you actually feel while doing those things. You stop asking yourself what you need, what matters to you, or what makes you feel alive. Instead, you follow routines and expectations without questioning whether they still make sense for you. This creates a disconnect between your actions and your emotions. You are doing things, but they don't feel meaningful anymore. And when your actions are not connected to your internal state, happiness becomes harder to experience. Because happiness is not just about what you do, but about how you feel while doing it. If that connection is missing, even good things can feel empty. And over time, this creates a sense that something is wrong, even if you cannot clearly define what it is. Many people grow up believing that happiness is something that should be present most of the time, especially if their life is going well. And this belief slowly shapes the way they interpret their own emotional state without them even realizing it. They assume that if they are doing the right things, making progress, or living a stable life, they should feel good consistently, as if happiness were a constant reward for living correctly. But this expectation creates a problem, because happiness is not designed to be a permanent emotional state. It is something that appears in moments, often briefly, and then naturally fades to make space for other emotions that are just as important. However, when you expect happiness to last, its absence starts to feel like something is wrong. You begin to notice every moment where you don't feel good, and instead of seeing it as normal, you interpret it as a problem that needs to be fixed. This creates a constant sense of dissatisfaction because your reality is no longer being compared to what it is, but to what you believe it should be. Calm moments start to feel empty. Neutral days start to feel meaningless. Even peaceful periods can feel like something is missing, simply because they are not intense enough to match your expectations. Over time, this distorts your perception of life. You stop appreciating normal experiences because they don't feel strong enough emotionally. You begin to chase moments that feel more intense, more exciting, more rewarding, because those are the only moments that match your idea of happiness. But the more you chase intensity, the harder it becomes to appreciate simplicity. And this creates a cycle where your baseline for happiness keeps rising, while your ability to feel it in everyday life keeps decreasing. You become dependent on strong experiences to feel good, and ordinary life begins to feel empty by comparison. But the problem is not that your life lacks meaning. The problem is that your expectations have made it difficult to recognize meaning in normal moments. Because meaning is not always loud, it is not always exciting, and it is not always obvious. Sometimes, it exists in quiet experiences that you would normally ignore if you are only looking for something intense. Learning to adjust your expectations does not mean lowering your standards for life. It means understanding how life actually feels most of the time. And once you accept that not every moment needs to feel special, you begin to reconnect with the parts of life that you were unconsciously dismissing. And that is where a more stable and realistic sense of happiness starts to return. Another reason why happiness fades over time is because you are emotionally exhausted, even if you don't fully recognize it in the moment. Emotional exhaustion does not always feel like extreme stress or burnout in an obvious way. Sometimes it feels like a lack of energy to feel anything deeply. You still go through your day, you still complete your responsibilities, but your emotional capacity is lower than it used to be. You don't react the same way. You don't feel as strongly. And even when something good happens, you don't have the energy to fully experience it. This happens when your mind has been dealing with too much for too long without proper recovery. It could be stress, overthinking, pressure, responsibilities, or even constant stimulation. All of these things consume mental and emotional energy. And if that energy is not restored, your ability to feel happiness decreases. Not because happiness is gone, but because you don't have the emotional capacity to access it. It's similar to being physically tired. When you are exhausted, even enjoyable activities feel less appealing. And the same thing happens emotionally. When your mind is drained, it prioritizes stability over intensity. It focuses on maintaining function instead of generating strong emotions. And because of that, your emotional range becomes narrower. You feel less of everything. Less excitement, less joy, less connection. This can easily be mistaken for emptiness, but in many cases, it is not emptiness, it is exhaustion. And the solution is not to force yourself to feel more, but to allow yourself to recover. At some point, many people begin to live their life on autopilot, and this is one of the most common reasons why happiness slowly fades without a clear explanation. Living on autopilot means that you are no longer actively engaging with your life, but instead repeating patterns that have become automatic over time. You wake up, follow your routine, complete your tasks, and move through your day without needing to think too much about what you are doing. While this can make life more efficient, it also reduces your level of awareness. And when awareness decreases, emotional depth decreases as well. You stop noticing the details of your experiences. You stop being present in small moments. Everything becomes predictable and repetitive, even if your life is not objectively boring. And because of that, your brain stops treating those moments as meaningful. They become background noise instead of something you actively experience. This is why days can start to feel the same, not because nothing is happening, but because you are not fully engaging with what is happening. You are moving through life, but not fully experiencing it. And when this continues for long enough, it creates a sense of emptiness, because meaning requires attention. And if your attention is not fully present, your experiences lose their emotional impact. Breaking out of autopilot does not require changing your entire life. It requires changing how you experience your life, becoming more aware, more present, more intentional. Because even small moments can feel meaningful again when you are fully there for them. Another subtle reason why happiness fades is because you begin to wait for the feeling before taking action, instead of allowing action to create the feeling. You tell yourself that you will do things when you feel motivated, when you feel ready, or when you feel like it. But those emotions don't always appear on their own. And because of that, you end up doing less of the things that could actually bring you back to life emotionally. This creates a loop where inactivity reinforces the lack of feeling, and the lack of feeling reinforces the inactivity. You wait to feel something in order to act, but you need to act in order to feel something. Over time, this pattern makes your life feel more passive. You are no longer actively creating experiences. You are waiting for them to happen. And when they don't happen, it feels like your life is empty. But the problem is not always the absence of opportunity. Sometimes, it is the absence of movement. Because emotion often follows action, not the other way around. And when you begin to move again, even in small ways, your emotional state starts to shift with it. Happiness doesn't disappear randomly, and it doesn't mean that something is broken inside you. Most of the time, it fades because your connection to your experiences, your attention, and yourself has changed over time. And once you understand that, you stop chasing happiness as something external, and you start focusing on how you experience your own life. Because happiness is not only about what happens, but about how deeply you are able to feel what happens. And if you can reconnect with that, even small moments can begin to feel meaningful again. Not because your life suddenly changes, but because your connection to it becomes stronger. And sometimes, the way back to happiness is not about finding something new, but about learning how to feel again what is already there.